My parents called CPS on me for raising their kids since I was 13, claiming I overstepped boundaries and stole their chance to parent. When I begged them to think of Jamie and Katie, Mom smiled and said, "This doesn't end until one of us gives up. I've got nothing left to lose." I just stared at her. That was 6 months ago. Yesterday, she got her test results back, started shaking, and hasn't stopped. My little brother Jamie's first word wasn't mama or dada. It was my name, Theo. That should tell you everything you need to know about my childhood. While other kids my age were stressing about prom dates, I stressed about packing school lunches and checking my siblings' homework. But I wouldn't have it any other way, because seeing Jamie and my sister Katie smile automatically made every sacrifice worth it. Plus, our parents had more important things to do. Mom discovered her passion for multi-level marketing schemes and wine clubs when Jamie was still in diapers. She'd lock herself in the home office making vision boards while Jamie cried in his crib. Dad found his escape through work trips with his secretary Rebecca, who seemed to accompany him on every single one. But honestly, I preferred it that way, because it forced me to do things I wouldn't have done otherwise. Every time my parents forgot a parent-teacher conference or Katie's dance recital, I got to be there instead. I got to be the reason their faces lit up. I opened a savings account the day I turned 16 and deposited every dollar from my part-time job, knowing we'd need it when Mom inevitably drained the grocery budget on another failed business venture. And for a while, our system worked perfectly. I'd wake up at 5:30 to pack lunches and check homework while our parents slept off their hangovers. The kids never went hungry, never missed an assignment, never felt unloved, and to me, that was all that mattered. But at Jamie's high school graduation, something insane happened. Me and my family all attended together. Mom even wore something other than yoga pants, and Dad left his phone in his pocket for a full 10 minutes. They sat in the front row like they'd earned those seats, posting photos with captions about their brilliant son. When he walked across the stage, tears were streaming down my face. I felt like I was watching my own child grow up, and 5,000 name calls later, it was finally time to leave. Or so I thought, because that's when Jamie got up on stage to give a speech. "This speech isn't about me," he started. "It's about the person who made sure I'd be standing here today." He found me in the crowd, and we locked eyes. I wiped my tears away out of embarrassment. When I was 6, I broke my arm falling off the monkey bars. The person who rushed me to the hospital was my brother Theo, who was only 13 and had to convince the nurses he was old enough to sign the paperwork. The auditorium fell silent. Even the rustling of programs stopped. Most kids learn to ride bikes with their parents. I learned in an empty parking lot at 6 a.m. because Theo worked nights to buy me that bike, and early morning was the only time he had free. Mom's phone slipped from her hand and clattered on the floor. Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. "So, Mom and Dad," Jamie said in a gentle, light-hearted tone, "thank you for giving me the best role model I could ask for." He raised his diploma toward me. "This is yours as much as mine, Theo. Actually, it's more yours, because while you were raising us, you gave up your own chance at being a kid." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Our extended family members were turning to stare at my parents. Aunt Helen's mouth had fallen open. Uncle Robert was shaking his head slowly, connecting dots from years of missed family gatherings. The applause started slowly, then built to thunder. After the ceremony, our relatives swarmed us. Not our parents, just us. Grandma grabbed my face in her weathered hands, sobbing apologies for not realizing sooner. "We thought you were just being a helpful big brother," she wept. My parents fled before the reception ended, their carefully maintained image shattered beyond repair. But they weren't done with me. 48 hours later, I was helping Katie practice for her dance recital when the doorbell rang. 2 women in pink suits stood on my porch, CPS badges glinting in the afternoon sun. My blood turned to ice water. They pushed past me like I wasn't even there, documenting everything with phones and notepads. The medication chart I'd created to track Jamie's ADHD prescriptions became evidence of unauthorized medical decisions. The birthday calendar with everyone's doctor's appointments was assuming parental authority without legal standing. Even the fully stocked refrigerator was somehow twisted into overcompensation for neglect. And suddenly, everything made sense. Because as they made calls about emergency placement orders, the woman said, "Yes, the biological parents called in the report. They're willing to resume full custody immediately." Katie clutched my leg as the CPS workers photographed her artwork on the refrigerator. Her tiny fingers dug into my jeans while she whispered something I couldn't quite hear. The taller worker bent down, her phone camera clicking rapidly. The woman straightened up and typed something into her tablet. I watched her fingers move across the screen, documenting Katie's behavior as potential coaching by sibling. My stomach churned as I realized they were twisting everything, even a scared child seeking comfort. Through the window, I spotted Dad's Mercedes pulling into the driveway. He stepped out wearing a charcoal suit I'd never seen before, his phone pressed to his ear. Mom emerged from the passenger side, already typing on her phone. Within seconds, her Facebook post appeared on my feed notification, "Fighting for my babies against false accusations. Prayer warriors needed." I glanced at the post while the CPS workers continued their inspection. Mom had tagged 37 people and somehow managed to misspell Jamie's middle name as Michael instead of Michael, the same middle name she'd given him after her father. Dad strode through the front door without knocking, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been practicing. He rattled off something about parental rights and due process while pulling documents from his briefcase. The CPS workers barely glanced up from their tablets. results. I tried explaining the medication chart to the shorter worker, pointing out how I'd color-coded Jamie's ADHD medications to prevent missed doses. My hands shook as I showed her the backup alarms I'd set on my phone. She asked for power of attorney documents. The words caught in my throat. We'd never thought to get any. Why would we? I'd been handling everything since I was 13. Grandma's car screeched into the driveway next. She burst through the door, demanding to take the children immediately. Her face was flushed, and she kept pressing her hand to her chest. Then she swayed slightly, reaching for the wall. She needed her diabetes medication. I knew the signs. Her blood sugar was dropping fast. The medication was in her purse, but she'd need food too. I glanced between her and the filing cabinet where I kept years of documentation. Every second I spent helping her was a second Mom could use to manipulate the situation. I chose Grandma. I grabbed her medication from her purse and rushed to the kitchen for orange juice and crackers. Behind me, I heard Mom's voice, syrupy sweet, promising Katie a puppy if she came to live with Mommy and Daddy. She mentioned a pink bedroom, all Katie's own. Katie's small voice carried across the room. But where will Theo sleep? Mom's pause lasted a hit too long before she launched into descriptions of a princess bed and toys. I steadied Grandma in the kitchen chair, watching her color return to normal while precious minutes ticked by. By the time I returned to the living room, our parents had spread out across the neighborhood like a virus. Dad stood on the front lawn with our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, handing her a Starbucks cup while shaking his head sadly. Mom had cornered the Johnsons by their mailbox, her hands gesturing wildly as she painted her picture of a troubled oldest child who'd overstepped boundaries. My phone buzzed simultaneously with 3 different crises. Jamie's school needed his permission slip for tomorrow's field trip. Our landlord wanted to know why the rent was 2 days late. The CPS workers demanded documentation of my employment history and financial records, all within the span of 10 minutes. I chose the rent first. Racing to my laptop, I transferred money from the emergency fund I'd built over years of part-time jobs. The late fee would eat into our grocery budget, but keeping a roof over our heads took priority. As I hit submit on the payment, I noticed the bank teller processing it was Cheryl from Mom's MLM downline, the same woman who'd been pushing essential oils at last month's PTA meeting. The emergency lawyer consultation would cost $300, money I'd earmarked for Jamie's SAT prep courses. I booked it anyway, knowing the CPS workers would document this financial juggling as instability. Every choice felt like stepping deeper into quicksand. Dad's composure cracked when Katie ran past him to grab her stuffed elephant, calling him Mr. Tyler instead of Dad. His face went pale, then red. His hands trembled as he pressed them against his temples. The panic attack looked genuine, because it was. Even the CPS workers paused their documentation to watch him hyperventilate into a paper bag Mom produced from her purse. Later, while Dad recovered on the couch with Mom rubbing his back, Jamie pulled me aside in the hallway. His eyes were red-rimmed but defensive. He told me Dad had apologized for missing all his baseball games, that he was trying now, that people deserved second chances. I bit my tongue until it bled, tasting copper while Jamie defended the man who'd chosen business trips over birthday parties, but I couldn't destroy Jamie's hope. Not yet. The CPS workers requested medical records for both kids. I retrieved the thick folder from my filing cabinet, the one I'd maintained since taking over their care. As I flipped through it, a faded emergency room report from Katie's 3rd birthday caught my eye. She'd fallen off her bike, needed stitches. The signature line showed my name as the guardian who'd brought her in, proof that I'd been parenting since I was 15. I photocopied it quickly, adding it to my growing stack of evidence. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. I remembered that night. Mom passed out in her wine-stained bathrobe. Dad in Houston for a conference. Me, holding Katie's hand while she got 4 stitches in her chin, singing her favorite song to keep her calm. That evening, after the CPS workers finally left with their tablets full of twisted documentation, I realized Katie's comfort blanket was still at our parents' house, the one she'd slept with every night since birth. She was already anxious, picking at her fingernails the way she did when stressed. I waited until dark, then crept across the property line. The fence was only 4 feet high. I'd climbed it dozens of times, retrieving balls and toys over the years, but as I swung my leg over the top, a motion sensor triggered. The Ring doorbell camera swiveled toward me, its blue light blinking steadily, recording everything. The next morning brought fresh chaos. Jamie's teacher called, explaining she needed his academic records from previous years to process his college applications. Records that required parental authorization, Mom's authorization specifically, as the parent listed on all school forms. I begged Mom to sign the release forms. She smiled, said she'd be happy to help once this misunderstanding was resolved, once I admitted I'd overstepped, once I stopped fighting the family reunification. Aunt Helen arrived that afternoon with coffee and concerned eyes. She sat me down at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd helped Jamie with multiplication tables for years. Her words felt rehearsed as she reminded me how I'd acted when Grandpa died, how I'd refused help, tried to handle everything alone. I was 8 when Grandpa died. Our parents were in Vegas, unreachable. I'd made sandwiches for Jamie and Katie, kept them calm, told them stories until Grandma could fly in from Florida, but Aunt Helen's version painted me as controlling, unable to accept support, just like now. Mom's Facebook campaign gained momentum hourly. Her post about healing our family collected 147 likes and dozens of supportive comments. When I tried responding with facts, explaining seeing the years of neglect. My comment was screenshot and reported for harassment. Facebook suspended my account within hours. The lawyer I'd consulted sent a formal letter to my parents' attorney. Their response came swiftly. My daily texts checking on Jamie and Katie were being documented as a harassment campaign against a family trying to reunify. Every concerned message became evidence of my inability to respect boundaries. Dad still controlled the kids' health insurance through his employer. When Jamie's ADH medication ran low, I called in the refill only to have it denied. Dad's insurance wouldn't approve it without his explicit consent. He texted me his terms: stop this nonsense, admit I'd overreached, and he'd approve the medication. Jamie's prescription would expire in 3 days. I spent 6 hours at the pharmacy trying to navigate insurance overrides and prior authorizations. Exhaustion pulled at my eyelids. When I jerked awake, crying from a stress dream, still in the pharmacy waiting area, the pharmacist exchanged worried glances with her colleague. I saw her type something into the computer. A note about potential substance abuse, probably. Sarah had been my best friend since middle school. She'd watched me raise Jamie and Katie, brought groceries when money was tight, held me while I cried from exhaustion. But when she met me for coffee, her hands wrapped around her mug like a shield. Her husband had concerns. If I continued this fight, if I kept challenging parents' rights, they couldn't let me babysit their kids anymore. The liability was too high, the association too risky. She cried as she said it, but she said it anyway. The neighborhood whispers started subtly, conversations that stopped when I walked by, eyes that followed me to the mailbox. Then someone sent me a screenshot from our local Facebook group. Anyone else worried about the Theo situation? The post had 89 comments. Neighbors discussing my mental state, my fitness as a caregiver, whether someone should do something. Mom claimed she'd attended Jamie's science fair 2 months ago. She posted photos as proof, her arm around Jamie in the gymnasium. But the timestamp was wrong. The photos were from the previous year's fair. The same week she'd posted Vegas trip photos, cocktails by the pool, while Jamie presented his project on renewable energy to empty chairs. My coworker Brad mentioned needing help with his taxes. Mom had offered to help through her new financial consulting business. She'd explained how he could write off his entire home office, maybe even his car. Classic MLM tax fraud disguised as expertise. When I proved Mom had lied about the science fair, showing the date discrepancy, it revealed an uncomfortable truth. I'd missed it too, working a double shift to cover Katie's dance costumes. Jamie's quiet voice cut through my vindication. At least you told me why you couldn't come. Small victories felt hollow. Jamie's teacher agreed to write a support letter for our case. I celebrated with a glass of wine that evening, the first alcohol I'd had in months. Through the kitchen window, I saw my neighbor's phone camera pointed at me. By morning, there would be documentation of my drinking problem. Mom's final text that week was short but clear. This doesn't end until one of us gives up. I've got nothing left to lose. She was wrong about having nothing to lose, but she was right about one thing. This wouldn't end until someone gave up, and I'd raised 2 kids from diapers to diplomas. I'd survived on 3 hours of sleep and ramen noodles. I'd given up my childhood so they could have theirs. I didn't know how to give up. The following week, Dad showed up at Katie's dance studio with someone new. My coworker Melissa walked through the door holding his hand, wearing a sundress that matched Katie's leotard. She crouched down to Katie's level and pulled out a worn copy of Junie B. Jones from her purse. Katie's eyes lit up as Melissa flipped to a dog-eared page and began discussing their favorite parts. I watched from the parent viewing area as Melissa braided Katie's hair before class, using the exact technique I'd taught Katie last year. Dad stood behind them, recording everything on his phone. The other parents glanced between us, clearly aware of the custody situation from neighborhood gossip. After class, Katie ran to me first, then hesitated when she saw Dad waiting. Melissa handed her a new Junie B. Jones book, still in its wrapper. Katie clutched it to her chest, looking between all 3 adults with confusion clouding her features. That night, I found myself scrolling through old text messages, searching for anything that might help my case. Instead, I discovered conversations I'd forgotten about. 3 years ago, I'd told Mom I'd handle bedtime so she could rest. She thanked me profusely. Now her lawyer would argue I'd systematically excluded her from parenting duties. My phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. Someone had forwarded me a screenshot from a group chat I wasn't part of. My old text to a friend from sophomore year filled the screen. Sometimes I wish I could just be a normal teenager. The message was dated 2 weeks after I'd started working nights to pay for Jamie's therapy. Below it, someone had added commentary about my resentment toward my siblings. The preliminary custody hearing arrived faster than expected. Katie sat in the judge's chambers for her interview while we waited outside. When she emerged, her face was red and puffy. The court advocate whispered something to the judge, who made notes on her legal pad. Later, the transcript revealed Katie's innocent words twisted into weapons. She'd mentioned how I used to lock the door when Mommy tried to come in at night. She didn't understand she was describing the nights Mom stumbled home hammered, demanding to see the kids at 2 a.m. Katie just remembered me saying Mommy was sick and needed to sleep. My lawyer requested old baby monitor footage from our home security system. What we found made my chest tight. Frame after frame showed teenage me rocking Jamie to sleep, changing diapers, preparing bottles. In the background, the sounds of our parents' parties filtered through the walls. Laughter, music, clinking glasses. The timestamp showed 1:47 a.m. on a school night. The The family court mediator reviewed the footage with a furrowed brow. She made notes about parentification and role reversal. Then she turned to me and explained how my parents' neglect had forced me into an inappropriate role. But instead of holding them accountable, she focused on how I'd perpetuated the dynamic by not seeking intervention sooner. I remembered Mom's Amazon password from years of ordering school supplies. Late one night, I logged into her account and downloaded 5 years of order history. The evidence was damning. Wine subscriptions, bar accessories, and party supplies dominated the purchases. During the same period, diaper orders were sparse and formula purchases non-existent. The browser's autofill revealed more than I'd expected. As I typed wine, the suggestions appeared. Wine bottle opener bulk, wine stain remover, wine storage cabinet. Meanwhile, searches for baby formula or diapers yielded nothing. Dad's LinkedIn profile painted a different picture than his court testimony. His work history showed gaps during crucial moments in our lives. Jamie's hospitalization for pneumonia aligned with a conference in Denver. Katie's first day of kindergarten matched a client meeting in Seattle, but the conference had been virtual and the client meeting rescheduled. He'd simply chosen not to be there. I compiled everything into a folder, cross-referencing dates with family photos. The pattern was undeniable. Every milestone, every emergency, every important moment, our parents were absent. But their social media showed a different story. Carefully curated posts about family time, using photos I'd taken, cropped to exclude me. My old therapist received a subpoena to testify about our sessions from when I was 16. I'd seen her through a school program after a teacher noticed me falling asleep in class. The court would have access to everything I'd told her about feeling like a parent, about the pressure, about wishing I could just be a kid. During a strategy meeting, my lawyer explained the harsh reality. The court might view my actions as enabling our parents' neglect rather than protecting my siblings. By stepping up, I'd allowed them to step back without consequences. The logic made me want to scream. I attempted to record a conversation with Mom at a coffee shop, hoping she'd admit to the neglect. My phone sat face down on the table, recording app running, but Mom spotted the slight glow from the screen. She smiled sadly and shook her head, then spoke loudly about how I was always watching, always recording, always trying to make them look bad. The next school pickup was torture. I sat in my car across the street, watching the clock tick past 3:15. School policy required children to be released only to authorized guardians. At 3:27, Mom's car finally pulled up. She waved at the other parents like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't kept Katie waiting, anxious and alone. Jamie's teacher pulled me aside after school one day. She'd been one of our strongest supporters, willing to testify about the years of parent-teacher conferences I'd attended alone. But her expression was grim. She explained that administration had warned her about getting involved. She had 3 kids of her own. She couldn't risk her job. She squeezed my hand and walked away. The small gestures hurt the most. Mom started wearing the same perfume our grandmother used to wear. She'd found Grandma's old coffee mug, the one with painted flowers, and used it during supervised visits. She even sat in Grandma's spot at the kitchen table, unconsciously mimicking her mannerisms. Our parents' lawyer sent a settlement offer. They'd agree to supervised visits for me if I dropped all neglect allegations and publicly admitted to overstepping boundaries. The document included a prepared statement about how I'd misunderstood their different parenting style and needed help accepting my role as a sibling, not a parent. I tore the letter into pieces, then carefully taped it back together. Evidence of their manipulation. Evidence that they knew exactly what they'd done. The security footage I'd remembered from the pharmacy visit turned out to be from a different location entirely. But when I pulled the correct footage, it showed something even more damning. Mom purchasing wine and lottery tickets while Jamie waited in the car with a 102-degree fever. The timestamp matched the pediatrician's records of his delayed treatment. Katie's art teacher discovered something during class cleanup. Hidden beneath construction paper in Katie's cubby were dozens of drawings. Pictures of our real life. Me making breakfast. Me helping with homework. Me tucking her in. And in the corner of each drawing, 2 small figures labeled Mommy and Daddy. Always separate. Always distracted. Always holding wine glasses or phones. The revelation about Mom's prescription fraud came accidentally. While reviewing the medication charts that CPS had photographed, I noticed discrepancies in the prescription numbers. Cross-referencing with pharmacy records revealed that Mom had been forging prescriptions for pain medication, using the kids' names. The evidence of me controlling medications was actually evidence of her addiction. Grandma faced an impossible choice. Supporting me meant risking her relationship with her daughter and access to her grandchildren. I found her crying in her kitchen, holding Jamie's baby photo. She explained she couldn't lose them again, not after already losing so much. She'd support our parents publicly, but slipped me a key to her filing cabinet before I left. Inside the cabinet, I found years of correspondence between Grandma and various family members, all expressing concern about our parents. Letters from Aunt Helen worried about Mom's drinking. Emails from Uncle Robert questioning Dad's priorities. A Christmas card from our late grandfather with a handwritten note. Those children need you. Don't wait too long. I started playing Mom's game. My social media posts shifted from defensive to hopeful. I wrote about praying for healing and hoping for reconciliation. Meanwhile, I screenshot everything, documented every interaction, and built my case methodically. I learned to smile while gathering evidence. The encounter with Rebecca happened by chance. I was grabbing coffee when she walked walked in, talking loudly on her phone about weekend plans. I approached casually, making small talk about the weather. She relaxed, not realizing I was photographing her car through the window. Jamie's baseball schedule was taped to her dashboard, next to a parking pass for Dad's office building. Our shared iCloud account became a goldmine. Years of photos our parents had forgotten about. Mom passed out on the couch while toddler Katie played unsupervised. Dad's business trips with Rebecca, complete with romantic dinner photos. Jamie's first day of school with only me in the pictures. I downloaded everything before they thought to revoke my access. The custody battle became more complicated when Jamie's biological father emerged from prison. Mom had never told us the truth about Dad not being Jamie's biological father. Now this stranger wanted visitation rights, turning our two-way battle into a three-way war. The court had to consider his claims while evaluating ours. Fighting on multiple fronts meant making sacrifices. Katie's emergency therapy appointment conflicted with a crucial court deadline. I chose the legal filing, knowing it would be marked as a missed appointment in her medical records. Another piece of evidence that I wasn't the perfect guardian I claimed to be. The financial strain reached a breaking point. My emergency fund, built over years of sacrifice, emptied into lawyer fees. Meanwhile, Mom used Dad's life insurance payout, money that should have gone to our education, to hire a prestigious family law firm. The imbalance felt like drowning in slow motion. The confrontation at Jamie's favorite pizza place started small. I was treating him to dinner when our parents walked in with their lawyer, voices raised. Other customers stared. The teenage staff looked terrified as Dad slammed his hand on the counter. The manager banned all of us, and Jamie lost his safe space because adults couldn't control themselves. Losing my job felt inevitable. The court dates, the drama, the constant phone calls, it all became too much for my employer. They called it a mutual decision, but I knew better. The worst part was my replacement, Melissa. She redecorated my desk the same day, hanging photos of her and Dad like she'd already won. Some nights I slept in my car outside the kids' school. I told myself I was keeping watch, making sure they were safe, but really, I had nowhere else to go. My apartment felt empty without their voices. Meanwhile, our parents renovated Katie's room into a game room, erasing her presence like she'd never lived there. Uncle Robert found me in the parking lot one morning. His face was haggard, aged by family drama. He begged me to let it go, told me I was calling Mom with stress. He didn't mention the years of stress I'd endured. He didn't mention how Mom's choices had nearly culled her children through neglect. My investigation into our parents' past revealed a cascade of damage. Jamie's teacher faced suspension for failing to report suspected abuse, even though she'd tried to help in her own way. Her daughter asked why Mommy cried at dinner. Her husband filed for separation, citing the stress of our family's drama. Another life destroyed by our war. I kept going anyway. I documented every lie, every manipulation, every failure. Even when Sarah met me in the Walmart parking lot to ask if I was sure our parents hadn't changed. Even when I couldn't answer immediately, doubt creeping in like poison. Even when the evidence showed I'd failed too. The discovery of Jamie's essay hit hard. His teacher provided it as part of the court documentation. What Makes Me Sad was the title. In careful handwriting, he described feeling invisible, wishing someone would notice him just for him, not for his grades or behavior. I'd never seen it. I'd been too busy making sure he had lunch money to notice his heart was breaking. Our parents' lawyer filed an emergency motion to advance the trial date. They knew my lawyer had a long-planned vacation to Bermuda. They'd researched his schedule, planned their attack accordingly. Legal warfare at its finest, using procedure as a weapon. Reading Mom's old journals revealed the painful truth. She'd wanted to be a good mother. The entries from Jamie's first year showed genuine love and intention, but addiction crept in slowly, then all at once. The schemes and wine became easier than facing her failures. In her mind, I hadn't helped. I'd stolen her chance to try again. Dad's anger made more sense viewed through the lens of guilt. Every accusation he hurled at me was really meant for himself. I was an easier target than his own reflection. Admitting I'd raised his children meant admitting he'd failed them. His rage was self-preservation disguised as righteousness. The betrayal of Jamie's trust felt like swallowing glass. His therapy notes contained admissions about feeling torn between loyalty to me and longing for our parents. To prove neglect, I had to reveal his private thoughts to the court. Another casualty of war, the sacred trust between siblings. I became someone I didn't recognize. Screenshot everything. Trust no one. Every interaction was potential evidence. Every kindness might be manipulation. The old Theo, who'd helped without question and loved without condition, died in that courtroom. What emerged was a survivor who knew sometimes you had to be cruel to be kind. Getting Katie's teacher to testify required leverage I didn't want to use. I knew about her husband's DUI, the one he'd hidden from his employer. The implication hung between us during our conversation. She agreed to testify, hatred burning in her eyes. Another bridge burned for the greater good. The temporary visitation victory felt hollow. I watched from my car as Dad taught Jamie to throw a football in the park. Both of them wore sunglasses, but I could see their shoulders shaking. They were crying, trying to build a relationship on the ruins of 13 years of absence. It should have felt like winning. It felt like watching everyone lose. Our parents' counterclaim gained traction with each passing week. Their lawyer painted a picture of a disturbed young adult with a savior complex who needed therapy, not custody. They weren't bad parents. They were victims of an overzealous child who couldn't let go. The narrative was was clean, simple, believable. Everything came down to Dr. Patterson's evaluation. The court-appointed psychologist would interview all parties and make recommendations. Our entire future rested in the hands of a stranger who would spend a few hours trying to understand 13 years of complex family dynamics. The past haunted every interaction. Mom's dealer's child approached me at the grocery store, asking why I didn't visit anymore. I'd babysat him for free when his mom needed help, back when I believed kindness didn't need repayment. Now his mother had leverage, knowledge of our family's dysfunction that could hurt my case. My former boss offered my job back with conditions. Put the family drama behind me. Focus on work. Pretend none of this was happening. The offer expired in 48 hours, just long enough to feel like a lifeline, but not long enough to see how the custody battle would end. The judge's words during a preliminary hearing chilled me. Love wasn't enough for custody. The court needed evidence of stability, proper boundaries, and the best interests of the children. All the nights I'd stayed up with sick kids, all the sacrifices I'd made, they were just emotions. The court dealt in facts. Mom's estranged sister emerged from years of silence. She owed me for helping with her rehab costs when no one else would. Her repayment came in the form of family history, documentation of Mom's patterns going back decades. She wouldn't testify in person, couldn't face her sister in court, but the papers she provided painted a damning picture. The documents revealed Mom's calculated choices. She'd known Dad was absent, but stayed for the house and insurance. She'd chosen financial security over her children's emotional well-being. Every wine bottle was a decision. Every missed recital was a priority revealed. Generational trauma stared back from the pages. Mom's father had been an alcoholic who'd chosen bottles over babies. She'd sworn to be different, then repeated every pattern. The cycle of addiction and neglect stretched back generations, and she'd known exactly how it felt to be abandoned. She'd done it anyway. Finding Mom's journal felt like discovering a roadmap to her soul. Hidden in Grandma's filing cabinet, the entries from 10 years ago were raw and honest. She admitted to letting me handle everything because it was easier. She recognized her failures even as she committed them. The self-awareness made it worse, not better. Her fear and self-hatred leaked from every page. She knew she was failing but couldn't stop. The wine numbed the shame, which created more shame, which required more wine. In her twisted logic, I hadn't saved the children. I'd enabled her destruction by preventing consequences. The realization hit me during a sleepless night. Mom had chosen addiction over her children just like her father had chosen it over her. She knew the pain intimately, had lived it, had sworn to break the cycle. Instead, she'd perfected it, refined it, made it socially acceptable with wine clubs and MLM schemes. I committed to breaking the pattern regardless of personal cost, even if it meant losing Jamie and Katie to the system, even if it meant destroying every relationship I had. The cycle had to end with me. Dad's deposition finally provided concrete evidence of willful neglect. He claimed to have attended a conference in Chicago during Jamie's hospitalization, but the conference had been canceled due to weather. He'd gone anyway, spending 3 days with Rebecca while his son struggled to breathe in a hospital bed. I presented the evidence without satisfaction. Watching Dad realize he'd been caught brought no joy. His shoulders slumped as his lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. I kept my voice steady, professional. This wasn't about revenge. It was about safety. The pattern became undeniable as testimonies aligned. Teachers, doctors, neighbors, all painted the same picture. 2 absent parents and 1 overwhelmed teenager trying to hold a family together. The evidence was overwhelming, but I felt no victory, just exhaustion. Dr. Patterson's evaluation loomed like a storm cloud. Both sides prepared their presentations, gathering evidence to support their positions. Everything we'd built over weeks of legal battles would filter through one person's professional opinion. The final preparation felt like preparing for war. Lawyers strategized, evidence was organized, witnesses were prepped. But underneath all the legal maneuvering was a simple truth. 3 children needed safety and stability. Everything else was just noise. The battle had transformed us all. Mom's hands shook from withdrawal. Dad had gained 30 pounds from stress. I'd lost enough hair that Katie had asked if I was sick. We were destroying ourselves to prove who deserved to be destroyed, but I'd survived worse. I'd raised 2 children on minimum wage and determination. I'd given up my youth so they could have theirs. This was just another sacrifice in a lifetime of sacrifices. The war wasn't over, but I was still standing.